Hello everyone, welcome back. So I think we're not okay. Hello everyone. So welcome to the next presentation of the PPM Summit, which is a case study. The topic is fostering operational excellence and partnerships in project and portfolio management in the environment of continuous change. So actually, we discovered about being driven by change in Antonio's presentation, and we'll continue to go further on the topic of how to manage in an environment of continuous change. And we have a very experienced speaker, Christian Lerche from Germany. Christian is the global head of project and portfolio management at Sanofi. Christian is responsible for leadership and management of R&D projects, global development of new pharmaceutical products, drug device combinations, and related healthcare solutions. So with that, I give you the floor and I welcome Christian to present you his case study.
Yeah, thanks, Minu, and thanks everybody for listening in here today. So I hope I can give you some ideas and kind of frameworks in order to help us all in improving operational excellence and partnerships in project and portfolio management. So I hope everybody can hear me well. So let's start. So that's kind of the number of approvals by CDAR in the last couple of years. The 2020 figure I just added here as a text on the right up. So you can see actually we are maintaining a high level of new drug approvals, and it was actually despite COVID-19 last year. However, if you look a bit into how it developed in terms of market potential for these drugs, we are now going more into orphan expedited kind of projects, which is normally kind of decreasing the sales potential a bit. So what we need to indeed, as we go into more niche and more targeted indications, we need, of course, as well to reduce the cost side, and I think that is a lot of it what project management is for. And we can discuss in the next 30 minutes, I mean, what we can do in this aspect. Yeah. So I have a bit of portfolio management aspects, project execution aspects. We'll talk a bit about fostering, partnering, and some governance if we have time for it. Yeah. So let's start with the general portfolio management aspect. So I think a very good framework always is to not only think about, what we would like to do and what kind of, is opportunity-driven innovation usually, right? So you kind of, you read a paper about a new target and you feel like, oh, that's great, let's do that, right? It's new science, exciting. However, I think we always need to go back as well in good portfolio management and think about, what should be done, actually should be working on this, because at the end of the day, what is the patient need? What is the medical need? What is the return ultimately? So to the value aspect is very important, as Antonio actually just outlined as well, right? So I think this is a very good framework always kind of to ask, what is needed, be close to the people that are in contact with the patients and not only with the scientists. So always kind of bring these two groups together, and then you will have the most fruitful and most targeted outcome, I'm pretty sure. So another very nice framework is always to talk about this, what is your core kind of business, what is adjacent, and what is transformational. So this kind of the incremental innovation versus the disruptive one. Yeah. And usually, I mean, we play in kind of the core business. Let's say, you know, you are in oncology player with lots of antibodies. So that's your core, and you can then you can think about, okay, let's be a bit adjacent and just, you know, extend our technology, let's say, to another indication, for instance, right? That could be an adjacent a place where you would like to expand, which would be logical and lots of synergies, right? But I think the most important, and Tony actually addressed it as well in a different context, that, you know, I think in pharma, at least 20% of what we do should be aimed at being transformational, right? And I mean, we may not do this consequently enough, and you know, really think about the big ideas that are coming next, right? I mean, and let's think about, you know, gene therapy. If people hadn't kind of spent were risky enough and had spent budget there, yes, we wouldn't have lots of the achievements today. So I mean, it's something that that we are willing to take risk in, yeah. But at the end of the day, it will pay off, yeah. So that's I think, a very important framework. So then, if we talk about productivity in R&D, just to get the terminology maybe right. So sometimes it's a bit it's a bit tricky on the success rate. It's usually, you know, how many projects really make it to the next milestone out of your projects that you have in the portfolio, yeah. Then it's the cycle time, of course, from one milestone to the other. How long does it take you, right, to achieve the next milestone? And here you would only take into account actually the successful ones, because all the others you don't know. Then, of course, I mean, other things that you can look at is resources spent, what you spend per project, meaning your productivity. And I think, yes, as already said as well in other talks, termination is critical. So set clear go, no go milestones where you then take actually decisions, yeah. And then at the end of the day, I think most importantly is the output, right? So what are you aiming for, right? I mean, let's say in research, are you aiming at clinical candidates, or are you aiming at POCs, or are you actually aiming at approvals, yeah? So that is very, very, very helpful kind of milestones and measures to have in mind. So then I think the cycle we are very much familiar with. I mean, it's an old publication from 2010, but I mean, unfortunately, there's not too many kind of more updated figures, and I think everything that relates to the clinic is still very accurate here, I think, yeah. So we just know that we have to have, like, here it says 8.6 programs in phase 1 if we want to launch one program probably 10 years later, yeah. So that's the attrition model that I think we all want to change all the time, right? And we all want to improve. But it's still facts, right? And I think there's always this kind of, you know, this is the benchmark that we work against. So therefore, it's very helpful to know it, right? I think we all want to be ambitious and beat this benchmark, yeah. But that is the benchmark, and I think we should all be kind of aware of it and be aware that a new drug to develop costs us at least 700 million, as it says here. It's probably more like in the billions, frankly. So then, as kind of, we'll be focusing a bit on the research piece, because I mean, currently I'm responsible for that in Sanofi, but at the same time, I think it's a very easy area to kind of build models. And probably the only one where you can build reliable models, because you have many projects in that space. So therefore, the number of projects kind of allows you to model, and it's not so much dependent on individual outcomes, yeah. So cycle time usually between the target selection, so basically when you start and have validated a project, to a lead candidate is about 2 years, and lead optimization from lead to candidate selection, it's about 2 years as well. So that's very rough, and very similar actually as well in this old Nature publication. Yeah, I think that was 4.5 years. So nowadays we would rather say it's more like 4 years. In terms of success rates, that is a bit different than in the past. So the asterisk figures is the one from the publication. I think nowadays we are more like in 30 to 45% probability success. I calculate usually with 50% probability of success for these phases, because it's more like my personal experience. Yeah. So if we do that, let's assume you're a big pharma player and you have a certain target. You want to, let's say, launch a new chemical entity per year, right? Then we saw on the publication you may need 10 phase 1 starts every year, right? And then you can say, okay, I need as well about 10 candidates, maybe a bit more, but that's maybe a reasonable size. And then you can start to calculate, okay, how many projects do I need in these different phases? And so lead to candidate, you will need then about, with these calculations, success rate 50%, cycle time 2 years, about 32 projects. And in the target to lead, you would need about 60 projects, right? So it's a portfolio of about 100 projects, which is, I think, if you look at benchmarks, a very reasonable size for kind of a big pharma company to have. And then you can of course complement these 8 by external acquisitions and external innovation overall. Yeah. So just as a frame. So let's talk about a bit execution. And so here I have this kind of Tony would say old school triangle, which I like to basically use to set expectations. Yeah, because what we don't like in project management is obviously when people kind of change the specs and change the TPP, and they still want to have, you know, it in the same time or with the same budget, right? And this simply doesn't work, at least under same circumstances. Yeah. So I think the triangle, if you have a concrete project, is still very, very important and will determine a lot of resourcing and as well planning kind of, right? And now, of course, we can think about how can we optimize that? And then we can talk about, of course, artificial intelligence, machine learning approaches that are changing the metrics of this relationship or the proportions of this relationship, hopefully, right? But even if we have less budget in the future, maybe available to run the same number of projects and still be in the same time frame, there will still be a constant relationship in this triangle moving forward, right? It may have changed, but it will be still the same. So I think for me, it's an important one that we shouldn't kind of forget about. Yeah. Then of course you have like, you know, other kind of, you know, measures of time and budget. How do you monitor this, right? I mean, usually you measure your time that you're already in phase, and if you're actually beyond, let's say, these 2 years that I mentioned before, then you should rather do a quality check, a reality check, and say, hey guys, I mean, are we still on track, or are we totally off track, and maybe we should just either stop this project here or rethink about a new ambition, right? So that is very important, to track this time and phase and track the money that you have already spent, even if it's spent, but it gives you an idea on, do you have still a plan, right? Very important, right? And then of course, I mean, resourcing, critical path, where can you actually add resources to be faster, where can you kind of maybe take away a bit of resources because you may not need this at the time, right? And these kind of considerations are important. So I think what we use a lot is in this early space, let's say, before you go to clinic, because it's very difficult to use an NPV calculation or some of these things that are just too early and not accurate, right? Usually a risk-adjusted NPV is in the research phase is usually negative, right? So because of the discount rate, so therefore it doesn't make sense at all. Yeah. So let's look into what can we actually, what are the risks and what differentiates good from a bad project, right? And it's very simple frameworks, you know, really, what is your differentiation versus the standard of care? What is the competition, right? I mean, you can be highly differentiated, but you have like three others that are way ahead of you and the same mechanism, then you should better reconsider this, right? I mean, what's the technical feasibility? Is that kind of, you know, a new approach? Is that an intracellular, extracellular target? What kind of modality? Are you experienced with the modality or not? Clinical developability, of course, you know, is there an established path to POC, or do you need to kind of, you know, have a totally new clinical trial design that has never been performed before? Are there endpoints that are clearly defined, yes or no, and all these kind of things? And of course, you have the value proposition, or what you want to call it. It's the value piece that is important. Medical need here, number of patients that you can address, and the ultimate return, right? So I think a very simple framework, but extremely powerful. So AstraZeneca has published something on this in the past, and they it's as well kind of from a bit older. It's from 2017. Nevertheless, it clearly showed that applying a rigorous framework for project prioritization, yeah, is really helping you to reduce the number of projects drastically, first and foremost, increase your focus, secondly, and thirdly, enhance the outcome, right? So you could say, oh yeah, but now they kind of, you know, reduce it from 250 projects to less than 100. Did they have the same outcome? And yes, they did, right? So, and I can only support that from our internal experience. I cannot show you the exact figures, but this is kind of the charts we usually show with real figures. But I mean, you see that applying rigorous prioritization to projects, doing the right selection very early on, increases your outcome ultimately. So we had a doubling of development candidates over the last couple of years. And of course, it then reduces your cost per development candidate, because at the end of the day, you just divide your entire budget that you have by the number of candidates to calculate your cost per candidate. So therefore, that is a reciprocal kind of relationship, right? So very powerful. Prioritization is very key. Yeah. Then maybe just talk a bit about cost in terms of projects. So what does a project cost in to bring it to the clinic? And so these are kind of, you know, figures you can either look up in annual reports, or the benchmarks out there. But a good, I think, budget for a big company is about $700 million or euro, depending on kind of where you are. And then, you know, let's take this 10 clinical candidates that you would like to come up with. So that would assume that, yeah, you have like $70 million per candidate, right? I mean, most recent benchmark is a bit higher from KMR, which is kind of the collection of big players. But it's a good benchmark. Yeah. So and then you can again kind of go and in order to have a benchmark, right, to understand, you know, where are we with our costs? I mean, how much does a project cost us versus competition? And here you can then just, you know, think about, you know, how many FTEs do I have actually on these projects in these different phases, and then you can make a kind of bottom-up approach and calculate what does actually a project cost me to go to the clinic, and yeah, you come up with, if you so I just kind of applied an FTE rate of 300 kilo here with some, you know, is that realistic? Yes or no? I think everybody has his own kind of numbers, but I just put that and I put a range, but that kind of results in a candidate price of about 15 to 20 million euro, which I think is a reasonable benchmark. And this assumes full success, right? Assuming that everything goes well and you just have this one project. Of course, it's not a very realistic scenario because you have many project failures. So take everything into account, you know, the attrition, etc. So you just don't need one project, but you need at least 2 projects in the latest phase, and you need probably 4 projects in the phase before, and then you need probably 8 projects in the really target discovery phase. And if you calculate this and all together, then it brings it up to this whatever 50 to 70 million euro per candidate, which would be risk adjusted, and it's exactly the same figure as you had here, by just taking your entire budget and dividing it by the number of candidates, right? So it works both ways, and I think it's a fair benchmark just to think about what are we up against and what do we need to beat moving forward. Yeah. So then in terms of partnering, so maybe just couple of aspects. So I think this is kind of a framework that I found as well very, very powerful. Always, it's about making, buying, or allying, right? And there are different aspects, right? I mean, one aspect is what is the strategic importance of a certain activity that you would like to, let's say, partner or get access to, and what is your competence in this area, right? Is it high? Do you have a high competence in the area? And it is super strategic as well, right? Then you should probably just do it yourself, right? So meaning make it, yeah. And of course, there's a timing aspect to it. I mean, if you don't have access to it, and I mean somebody is 3 years ahead, then you're probably better partner. So it should be actually maybe 4-dimensional here, or 3-dimensional. It's only 2-dimensional. But just it's these 2 aspects I think that are very important. On the other hand, if you know you don't have a lot of competence, but it's of very high strategic importance, yeah, you should probably get and partner, learn at the end of the day, right, and make it a key competence internally, and then long run you can do it as well yourself, right? So you would be on the low competence and on the highest strategic importance, so you would ally in a first instance, right? On the other hand, if it's not of very much importance, so let's say buying tubes from a supplier for the lab, yes, you should just buy it, right? You shouldn't start to do your own tubes, right? So I mean, just as some examples, I think here let's maybe bring in some aspects from the pandemic last year, and I don't know what the experience is with others here on the discussion, on the panel, in the auditorium. But I think what played out very well last year is that for companies who had kind of a large geographical spread of activities, right, it was certainly beneficial because, I mean, when certain areas was heavily impacted, you had the chance to, or the opportunity to kind of go to other areas, right? So I think this is something that you need to have in mind for your partnering strategy overall. Is it, do you want to focus just on one particular area, right? Or do you want to be just focused on China alone, for instance, right? As a very concrete example, yeah? And then, of course, which I think was an experience from last year as well, that we need to have ideally a good network of established partnerships before such an event, yeah? And that only works if you have already activities with them, yeah? Have MSAs in place, etc. That if you have some impact on internal activities, that you can change the balance of giving more outside and doing less inside, right? Or maybe doing more inside and doing less outside if outside is impacted, right? So, I mean, there are both ways. And then, of course, I mean, have your plans ready to go, even in non-pandemic times. And that is, I think, key learning from many of us in the last year, yeah? So in this entire process, there's often a question, you know, when should actually project and portfolio management get into this partnering process, right? And I think, I mean, of course, the portfolio management aspect is very early. So, you know, what is the need? How does it fit into the portfolio? Where do we have a gap in the portfolio? So that's very early on. And then the project management kicks in usually when, yes, you have due diligence and you need to kind of, you know, make the evaluation of timelines and costs and is it realistic? What is proposed by the partner, or do we need to kind of discount a bit, you know, everything that are the assumptions provided by the partner? And so that is then key. And I really made the experience, if you don't have project management, internal project management in the process early on, then it very often leads to very bad assumptions and actually wrong timelines in a partnership. Yeah, so that for me was very important in the past. Yeah. Yeah, I wanted to go into one example. I think due to timing, maybe we just go to I wanted to governance aspects that I feel are important to consider. So the one is always, you know, you have different TAs, and you would like to, you know, you have the choice. Either you kind of, you know, give each TA, like on the right hand side, you give them budget and you let them kind of play around with it, and everybody gets the same more or less, and then you can leave them the strategy, etc. Right? And the other one is a more centralized approach on the left hand side, which is which has some advantages, certainly, right? So, I mean, me coming from a French, more centralized approach, usually with Sanofi, the advantage is, of course, that you have much more flexibility, right? So you can say, oh, a certain TA doesn't need all this money this year because there were some project failures and they don't have any ideas or maybe maybe they have lots of ideas how to spend it, but you feel like these ideas are a bit, you know, immature, and therefore we could actually need the budget somewhere else. So that is the big advantage here, right? But you need to constantly adjust and constantly control, and it's annoying for the TAs, and it's a very cumbersome approach, but has its benefits, certainly, in terms of spending probably in a much more diligent way your budget, right? On the decentralized way, yes, you give the full power to everybody. It really depends, I think, on the size of the budget and the TA. Is it critical mass, yes or no? Can they actually do something with money that is safe, etc.? Yeah. So I think that is one aspect. The other aspect is in terms of governance, and I think across the value chain. Again, speaking from a kind of big pharma perspective, I think what is always ideal to have committees governing internal and external projects at the same time. I mean, I think there's always this aspect of Chinese wall in case of innovative technologies, etc., coming in, and you need to be very careful with contamination. Nevertheless, having kind of a very exclusive membership in this committee, which can help you to overcome this contamination issue, right? And then to say that we actually apply the same methodologies and the same criteria for internal and external projects. That is very important. Yeah. Same thing then, of course, for research, for late development, for early development. I think just there are different aspects. So ideally, you have like 3 different committees for them. And it avoids bias, right? I mean, because if you give it to the TAs or to a more decentralized approach, there is, of course, much more bias and interest in the different groups, right? And of course, I mean, at the end of the day, it avoids as well kind of an NIH syndrome that is that can still be kind of dominant somewhere. Yeah. So I think these were the different frameworks, aspects I wanted to share with you. Hope that was helpful. I still see actually our future very bright in biotech and pharma. And I think with all these opportunities coming now in terms of, machine learning, artificial intelligence, portfolio management technologies, I think all of that will help us a lot to reduce the cost moving forward, that we can actually develop much more targeted therapies moving forward. Yeah. Thanks a lot for your attention. Of course, I'm here for any questions as well.
Thank you, Christian, for this wonderful presentation. Every time I hear you, I am always so much hooked into the topics you're working on, and I really like the fact that what you said, that 20% of what we do in pharma should be transformational. Can't agree more. I really liked the parameters that described R&D productivity. The way you related portfolio size simulation based on modeling, and also what you talked about, how to increase efficiency of R&D, how to collaborate. Sometimes collaborating with your enemy or competitor is a good option, and project management and portfolio management actually needs to be part of the whole cycle whenever you are working with external partners when you're negotiating. And I really like the model that you had for centralized versus decentralized model of governance and how you can take it up. We have 4 questions from the audience. So since we have a break coming up, I suggest we take up the questions very quickly. The first question is from Anlene. She was asking the $70 million you referred to, does that include commercialization or just discovery, preclinical and clinical development activities?
Yeah, so it's a good question, and it showed that I wasn't kind of obviously very that I may not have explained it well enough. So the 70 million is really the cost that you incur to bring a product to IND enabling studies. Yeah, so it's way before commercialization, way before that. Yeah, so that's the cost that I think we have to acknowledge. That's currently the benchmark that it will take to bring a product into close to first in human. Yeah.
Great. We have a second question coming up from Mikhail. At which stage of a R&D project are you confident enough to confirm POS of the project, considering all milestones up till launch of the product? Only after candidate selection milestone? So he's saying, I assume management will request project POS even earlier to approve the investment.
Okay. Yeah, I think, I mean, so if you take the normal benchmark, I mean, you say you need a proof of concept in humans, right? And then still you have kind of a 50% dropout afterwards. What we do now at Sanofi, we call it kind of proof of commercial concept. So that is something that goes beyond proof of concept in a clinic. It's really to show that you have a very differentiated product and that it kind of can make the claim that or can hold to the claim that you would like to make in the label at the end, right? And that is the ultimate goal. I think, I mean, yes, I mean, as said, I mean, I think if you have a clinical candidate, yes, you should be reasonably sure, but still 1 out of 10 will make it, right? That's reality for the time being, unfortunately, and we have to, of course, challenge this and come up with better solutions. But I think it's always difficult, right? When management asks you, so, but which of your projects are the ones that will make it, right? So that's always a great question. But I mean, you can have your personal preference, but at the end of the day, you don't know, right? Who will show a tox, which one will show kind of a tox signal, and which one will ultimately show efficacy or is translatable to the human setting. Yeah, we are working on it with better biomarkers, etc. But yeah, I think that's just, it's a reality check what I'm presenting. Yeah.
Exactly, Christian. Can't agree more. The next question comes from Mike. How do you see transformational technology impacting the metrics that you showed? Example, small molecule through to genomics and genetics.
Yeah, so I think these are the questions, right? So I think in terms of small molecules, we will see a drastic change. I mean, in terms of input, you know, on tox from machine learning, input on new structures, on design of new structures, from artificial intelligence, from modeling, from virtual screens, and all these things. So I really hope that this can make a change. I mean, we are talking about it though since at least a decade. I mean, we have to recognize it. So, but I think we have now probably the means to really implement it. That's my personal feeling. So I really hope that that we can change that. Yeah, this is for small molecules. I think in genetics and genomics is important. I think which is much more important is, of course, I mean, you have this, right? I mean, a phenotype that you know, and or a genotype that corresponds to a certain phenotype, and then you have these translational kind of aspects that play into this. But I think in terms of biomarkers, so really to have the predictable biomarker in an animal model that you know will have a meaning in man as well as predictable. That is the key for kind of, you know, lowering the attrition rate. And I think there's still a lot of room for improvement. Yeah. And then our companies out there like Velo Health, and they're really claiming that they can do it. I think the proof is out, but the claims are there already. So that's a good sign. And I think we as Big Pharma, we are challenged to do the same, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. So we have two more questions, final questions from Jacqueline. I think your first question, Jacqueline, I can respond to it. Please confirm what the NIH syndrome stands for. It's not invented here. I think it's more a bias for people for avoiding things by saying that this concept was not invented here. Christian, you can add to it.
No, absolutely. No, I think it's a current, still existing syndrome. I mean, that you feel like, I don't trust this. It's coming from outside, and I need to kind of repeat all these experiments, and what we have done is much better because you're much more familiar with your own project. Sometimes more difficult to, and there's the other extreme where people always want to have something that they don't have, right? So like you want to buy something, and that's the other extreme, right? So you need to find a good balance between the two.
Absolutely. So thank you, Christian. So the final question from Jacqueline is regarding comments on POS. Do you use any external benchmarks for POS at each stage gate?
Absolutely, yes. So and actually what I showed you was a publication from in Nature from 2010. Is still a very good one. And that is something that you can have in the slides that I will provide you, and you can look it up. Yeah. So it's about, as said, I mean, it's about 10% for a phase 1, or maybe a bit more, and 50% after POC, and yeah. So once you have submitted it to regulators, it's usually maximum a 10% dropout. Yeah. So these are kind of the highlights, but the more details are in publications out there. We use, of course, industry benchmarks that you can buy, but I cannot officially share. So therefore, but of course, Evaluate Pharma has that as well. So I mean, if there are many different benchmarks out there. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Christian, for sharing, and I am really proud of all your achievements, especially the interesting topics and the way you come up with your analysis. I'm always amused and amazed, and I feel like, yeah, it's at least so much of inspiration around me. So thanks for your amazing ideas. And with that, I think we can move to a quick break. We are a bit late, but so we'll take a short break of 10 minutes. Please use this option, networking. Just click on it, and you can just you can find someone you don't know, and it's always good to try out this option if you haven't tried on Hopin. And I think also we might have a short announcement from Simona. So Simona, if you wish to take up the stage, and if you wish to announce something on the networking and on the PPM workout, feel free. So with that, let's move to the break. So see you in 10 minutes.
Hello, everybody. I'd like to correct the course a bit. Since we're running a bit late with the program, we decided to skip the break for now, and we'll catch up on everything during the lunch break. So I'll keep you posted about what we're going to do next, but I guess that we've got our next speaker ready, so we can go backstage and then jump straight into the presentation.